Hello, everyone. It's Joe at Lucas Liquors, and I got a special guest this morning, and this is going to be pretty awesome. Paul Haletko from Few. It's in Illinois. It's my hometown. Paul, thanks for joining us this morning.
I'm glad to be here, Joe. Excited to be here.
Excellent. We have got some. Well, let me first start out by what a killer job you guys do, and we need to get the public to understand that, because when you open one of these bottles up, and there's a few that I've fallen in just love with, I want to talk about them. So give us a little bit first. Let's talk about Few, talk about where you're at, how do you do things, and then let's jump into some of these amazing world-class winners, which I think is amazing. I'd love to say that. I'm sure you do too. But go
Sure
ahead.
do.
You fire away. Tell me a little bit about the Few.
So Few is a small distillery. We're a grain to glass distillery. And what that means that we actually make all of our own spirits ourselves. Everything comes from as close to home as we can get it. All of our grain is Midwest, or kind of like the Midwest Canada part. And we really try to restore the craft into distillation. I think over, post prohibition, I think that a lot of, large companies continue to grow and take over and dominate the spirits industry. And it's small companies like Few that are trying to bring back that craft. You can look at Few, you can look at Leopold, you can look at Laws, and we're all trying to do what we can to bring back the art and craft of distillation these days.
That's awesome. Well, I want to tell you from my experience when I started getting, of course, I got to try the Few. I mean, they're from my hometown.
Got to.
Absolutely. And I think we should jump right into it, because you have a great line. But if it's okay, I want to start with some of what I call the big boys. Okay.
Sure.
And I want to start with one that I actually push back a little bit on. In fact, two of them. And it's the cardinal rule. You know, me being a big bourbon and whiskey guy, I understand what it takes to get the flavor out of something, but sometimes you shortcut it and you don't see it. So let's talk about the American whiskey, okay?
Yeah.
So this is the big boy, all right, for my folks out there. So I first tasted this back in November, and I remember telling Kelly, no, it doesn't work. What a mistake I made. So while everybody went off to find out that this ends up being the #1 whiskey in the world, just won San Francisco, I was like, what the heck was I doing? So I had to I'm going to take a sip if that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine by me, man. That's what it's for. Whiskey's for drinking, not talking.
So I was like, what did I miss? I tell you what, guys, I missed a lot. So this is fantastic. And Paul, I'm going to let you talk about it a little bit while I have a little bit of sip, and then I'll come back and I want to share my thought.
Well, it's interesting you say that too, Joe, because I do think it's a little bit different. Some of the flavors come a little bit out of left field. And so I hear where you're coming from, and I'm glad you gave it a chance. I definitely think it's a whiskey that rewards that second and third sip. And what it is it's a vatted whiskey or a blended whiskey. And just like you said, just won double gold best in class at San Francisco for whiskey. And it's a vatting, and it's a killer whiskey. It's a vatting of bourbon, Few rye, as well as a third whiskey that we made. And on top of this win in San Francisco, it also won Best American Blended Whiskey from the World Whiskey Awards as well, too. So it's really bringing down some hardware these days. We like being the best. Probably not that different than anybody else out there, really. But that vatting is what makes it different. And that third whiskey, even though it's a relatively small part of the overall composition of the whiskey, I think it makes all the difference. And, in the Few American whiskey, you get that bourbon sweetness and spice, and you get that rye heavy spice and a little bit of fruit, which my guess is we'll talk about the bourbon and rye a little bit more later. But that third whiskey has this really intense texture and richness, and that really carries through. Now, the whiskey on itself is super smoky, although, as you sit and sip it, I'm going to guess you're probably not getting a lot of smoke flavors. because I don't think the whiskey as a whole is smoky at all. But it does have this rich, full texture that is, I think, pretty unique in whiskeys, and I think is worth people giving it a shot.
So I'm going to back up on one thing so you could explain it to the people who are watching, because everybody doesn't understand a lot of times how we make things. What does
Yeah.
vatted mean? What does vatted
So
mean?
vatted just means that we take a bunch of different whiskeys and put it into one single vat. To me, it's a weird, loaded word in the whiskey business, but don't worry about that. That's not important. What it means is that it's just different whiskeys coming together in a single vat, and now it's a vatted whiskey because it's been put in a vat.
Okay.
We're whiskey makers, not geniuses.
So I will tell you now, for me, the first time I drank it, I was slow on it. I just judged it out of the gate. After you start winning all these awards, this is the #1 whiskey in the world. I'm like, what am I missing, right? So I sat down. Now it's selling like hotcakes because, I mean, my customers, when we find stuff, we get it to them. And I can tell you guys, whoever hasn't tried this one, do we have any problems with production on this one? That's one I'd like to ask, because that's important. And,
I mean, I
when
think
I
we're
say
really,
problem, is it limited?
I definitely think it still remains somewhat limited, and we're trying to really control, at least a little bit of control, the growth. Certainly, we have got supplies of bourbon and rye, but that third whiskey, which is what gives it that magic touch, we continue to be somewhat limited on it, and so we're really only giving, we're really trying to get like the top retailers access to bottles like that, because it is somewhat limited. And so in Denver, obviously, we're working with Lucas because you guys are one of the top retailers. But no, you're not going to find it everywhere. You're only going to find it at the best of the best. We're working on increasing supply, but for now, products like this are why you come shop at Lucas. They're the best of the best.
Thank you, Paul. I will tell everybody, we all need to start getting this bottle. This bottle needs to be part of our collection. And my collection, I have all different, like I got bourbon from New York. I got bourbon from Kentucky, Indiana, Las Vegas, Washington. It's always interesting. This is grain to glass. A lot of times when I talk about those bourbons from other states, a lot of them are MGP.
It's all Indiana.
Yeah, and this is hometown. So I tell you what, this gets a 5-star recommendation for me. I think it's the complexity of this whiskey at under $50 is simply top-notch, amazing. And I want everybody to try it. When we get back to our tasting counters, I'll definitely have a bottle open for everybody to try. It's spectacular. You definitely need to get one. All right, Paul, what we should do is let's take a couple-minute break, and we'll come back and let's visit on the next one.
Sounds great.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
You got it.